right, we are live. Awesome. All right. Hello and welcome everyone to our 8th live stream for the Empowerment Podium. For those of you that are returning, welcome back. And for those of you that are new here, I want to welcome you. I'm so glad that you guys are joining us today, and I really hope that you will stick around. You can join this community by subscribing to this channel, following us on Instagram and TikTok, and liking us on Facebook. The links to those socials are in the description below, so check them out. On another note, I just want to say I am so excited for today's speaker, especially since we will be trying out a new interactive Q&A format for the duration of today's talk. So for a little bit of housekeeping before we start, as today's storyteller is telling his story, please feel free to submit any additional questions that you have that you would like to be answered in the Q&A, and we will feature, and we will try to get to those as soon as we can. So without further ado, looks like things are working good. I'm going to present today's speaker. All right. So I would like to present Samuel Moore-Sobel. Samuel is an author, a speaker, and a columnist. His debut memoir, Can You See My Scars?, is the story of a harrowing encounter with sulfuric acid, trauma, and severe burns. His book is currently available for purchase through Mascot Books and on Amazon. He writes about trauma and his experience as a burn survivor. He's been invited to share his story with audiences across the country and offers practical advice on how to overcome adversity. He has a degree in government and international politics and currently lives with his wife in Northern Virginia. You can read more about him at his website, www.samuelmoresobel.com, which I have linked in the description down below. So with that, let's just get into this discussion. Hi, Samuel. How are you doing?
Doing well, Kay. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. All right, so I guess the best place for us to start is, where this journey of healing started for you. So can you tell us, a little bit about how you got your scars?
Absolutely, and thank you so much for having me here tonight, and hello to the audience. Appreciate everybody being here as well. Mm-hmm. I got my scars more than a little over 11 years ago now. The day was September 1, 2009. I was 15 years old. Mm-hmm. I was a week away from starting my sophomore year of high school, and I was eager to do one last odd job before the summer came to a close. And I was hired by a man in my community who wanted boxes and furniture moved from his home to a storage facility. Mm-hmm. But when I arrived to his home on September 1, 2009, the details changed. And at the time, I chalked it up to maybe a misunderstanding, but that was a common theme throughout the day, was these misunderstandings of the role of what we would be doing there at the man's house. And so it turned out we would be emptying the storage facility and bringing back all the things in the storage facility to the man's home. And from there, we would take everything to a friend's house who had a shed that was just a few minutes down the road. So we ended up driving, doing that, emptying the storage facility, like I said, taking everything and going to his friend's house, which turned out to be more than 45 minutes away and passing county lines. We ended up at this house, and the shed was at the bottom of the hill. And as we go, the homeowner opens the shed, and it's just filled to the brim with items. And so we're instructed to start taking everything out so that we can get the man's stuff in. And I'll never forget it. There was a box that made its way into my hands. I looked down, and it looked like there was books and hay. And when I say hay, it was literally straw protruding from this box, which I thought was an odd assortment of items. But who am I to judge what people have in their sheds? And the homeowner said, toss it. And so I did as I was told. And the second it hit the cement slab where we were throwing everything, an explosion rang out. And I saw this substance flying towards me. I didn't know what it was, but I instinctively closed my eyes, and it hit my face, and the pain just began.
Wow. Ugh, I honestly can't imagine how scary that must have been, how painful, like how difficult that must have been to go through, and scary. It's such a traumatic experience. I also can't imagine that the recovery, was any easier than the pain that you experienced on the actual day. So I'm curious, what did your road to recovery look like?
Yeah, absolutely. So from there, it turned out I was eventually making it to the hospital. I'm thrown into a chemical shower, and it turns out that I have second and third degree burns to my face and arms. And so there's immediately, I get medevac from that hospital to another hospital that's better able to handle my care. And they do the next morning, they do a debriding surgery, which is basically to scrape the affected areas to prevent infection. And then they release me, and there was nothing left that they could do for me. The rest was up to me. And I just remember sitting in the backseat of my parents' car and driving as we drove home that day, and just wondering what life was going to look like. I just felt so lost, and I felt like I didn't know what was going to happen. Everything seemed so uncertain. And the first few months unfolded in a manner kind of similar to what we've all been living through the last year of being at home and not being able to leave the house because of the risk of infection. And not being able to hug other people because of my scarring. Also had to have an antibiotic on my face at all times. It was just a really intense recovery. So I spent the first few months of my sophomore year of high school at home. Teachers came and taught me. And when I did eventually make it back to school, I didn't really go back full time for most of my sophomore year. And I was in and out of doctor's offices. I had more than a dozen operations over the next several years, laser operations, facial reconstructive surgeries, just so many operations to have the face that I have now. It was a lot of work to get here. My last surgery was just a few years ago. And so it's just been a really long journey, much longer than I ever could have anticipated more than 11 years ago when this first happened.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's such a long road. And that is an interesting thing that you bring up about, it's similar. The experience you had is very similar to what we've experienced the past year, being, socially isolated, distance from people. I didn't think about, how burns can technically mean that you're more prone to infections and stuff like that. So that is interesting how we all have a little bit of an idea of kind of what you felt, but I'm sure it's nothing the same, I'm sure that, your scars were physical following the whole ordeal, but did you face any, mental health struggles as a result of that accident?
Yeah, that's a great question. I definitely did. And it's interesting because in the first part of the experience, you're really focused on the physical. You're focused on those intense, moments of physical recovery, and that's what the doctors are focused on. But as the dust began to settle, I started to notice that I was experiencing other mental health symptoms as well. And some of those were irritability, insomnia, having trouble getting through the day, feeling exhausted, having trouble getting out of bed in the morning. And so eventually, within a few months after the accident, I went to counseling and went to see a psychiatrist, and he diagnosed me with symptoms of depression and post-traumatic stress disorder. And that began a long journey of, again, years of therapy, of working through those symptoms, working through what I had been through the accident. And I'll never forget what he shared with me. He shared with me this idea that, that I could assemble tools in a toolbox. So he shared with me this idea of, put these tools in your toolbox so that you can combat whatever issue comes your way, whatever symptom or whatever that you're facing comes your way. At any adversity, you can face that. And so I went about doing that. For me, some of that was journaling about my experience, talking to others about my experience, the sessions I was having. I went on medication for a time because that was another tool that I had. And so really just, built up these tools in my toolbox so that eventually I was able to, as he encouraged me to do, to reason my way through the symptoms I was experiencing and to get where I am today. Again, that was a really long journey. And in some ways, those emotional scars that I had were far more impactful to my daily life than the physical ones that I carry.
For sure. Yeah. I think one of the, ongoing themes that I've kind of picked up throughout, some of the speakers that have come on the channel before you is just that, therapy is hugely beneficial. No matter what your baggage, no matter what your scars, physical, emotional, no matter, what you're facing, it's definitely something that's a hugely impactful resource. So thank you for sharing your experience with that. having to deal with all of that trauma at such a young age, it must have really been extremely difficult. I think you really are a true survivor, but what helped you overcome that traumatic experience, outside of the therapy? What kind of tools did you use?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you. I appreciate that. I definitely recommend therapy to anybody. It's been changed my life in so many ways, and I wouldn't be where I am today without it. So definitely encourage it for anyone who's facing adversity. For me, it was a combination of a lot of different things. In addition to the tools that I kind of outlined before, it was also really finding ways to get outside of myself and my experience and to use my scars to serve others. And so what that looks like in high school, I was selected to be participate in a program called PEER, which is Positive Experiences in Educational Relationships. And so it provided me with the opportunity to mentor middle school students at a sister middle school, and then also meet with other high school students who requested, help. And it was really interesting because the more I got out of my own head and my own experience, I could see the ways in which others were struggling with what I was struggling with, even if it was different circumstances. We all have to ask ourselves those same questions of who am I, and who do I want to be, and what is my purpose? And especially as a teenager, we're going through that as you're becoming an adult. And so for me, I was able to kind of see other people's stories and see the commonalities that we all have, that my story was and is a human story, and that we all have experiences, and we all have scars that we all have to carry. And it isn't so much whether adversity will come, it's what we will do once it arrives.
Yeah I think that's I really enjoyed hearing about that, just because that's kind of like some of the premise of this channel, is that everyone has scars, everyone goes through certain things, and everyone has similarities in their experiences, and there's something to be learned from everyone about how they've handled given situations or whatever. So I think it's great that you were able to find networks of people that had similar experiences that you could kind of draw support from. And it's interesting that you brought up, we all have scars, because I know one of our previous speakers on this channel, Christy Bacon, who also is another burn survivor, she taught us, that we all have scars, whether they're physical or emotional. So I'm just curious, what do your scars mean to you?
Yeah, I think now, if you'd asked me that 10 years ago, I would have had a very different answer for you. But now I really had to go through a process of forgiveness and acceptance and embracing of my scars. When this first happened, I felt ashamed, and I felt guilty, and I felt just all these emotions, and I didn't like how I looked, and I spent years feeling that, and it really affected my life. It was something that really affected romantic relationships for me, because I carried so much emotional baggage, and I didn't think anybody would ever want to be with me. And so it really affected my self-image for so many years. But really, in the last few years, I was able to finally kind of come to a place, and I want to emphasize that it takes a lot of time. For those who are watching today, it's this. I'm coming to you more than 11 years after this, so it took me a lot of time to get here. But I think for me, my scars today, I've been able to transform them from images of shame to symbols of survival. To me, I look in the mirror every day, and I'm proud of my scars, and my scars help inform who I am and my self-image in a positive way. My scars today, they make me a more empathetic husband. They make me a more empathetic manager in my day job. They make me a better leader and more effective leader. And so today I see the ways in which my scars have helped me in some ways. There's been positive things that have come from them. I want to be clear. I'm not saying that I look back and I'm really happy that this happened to me. And if I could go back and change it, I would absolutely do that. But I just want to emphasize that that no matter what happens to us, there's always positive that we can glean from it. And sometimes it takes adopting that attitude of gratefulness and adopting a perspective that sees that. But today, for me, it's I'm proud of my scars, and I don't feel the need to hide them in any way. Because I'm proud of who I am, and they're a part of me. And to me, the last thing I'll say is they remind me, now that I have come to this place, they remind me of all that I've been through. So no matter what happens in the future, whatever adversity I face, I can always reflect back on all that I overcame, and it gives me that confidence that I can face whatever else comes my way. When I was 15, I didn't have the life experience to know that. And when you're a teenager, I felt like every feeling feels like it's going to be permanent, because you just don't have the life experience to know that things can get better and life can get better and circumstances can change. And so, with the benefit of that life experience and coming to the place I am now, I see my scars as the benefit of being able to kind of, spur me on towards the future, and to be fearless and bold in everything I take on now.
Yeah. They're a part of you. They've informed who you are today. And so I think, I think it's really beautiful, that you can see like something so positive out of like such a negative experience. And I think, you're totally right with the benefit of hindsight. Like as we age and get more life experience, we realize, we can look back on things and say, okay, that wasn't great, but it taught me so much about myself, or it changed who I am and everything. So I think that's awesome. From speaking with you, I know you have a book out, which I already mentioned, called Can You See My Scars? And you've also written about your experience with adversity in various articles and columns. So I'm just very curious, what inspired you to start writing about your journey instead of just speaking about it?
Yeah, that's, it's one of those things that just came to me from really the beginning. I remember just a couple weeks after the accident, I was lying awake at night, and I was sitting in bed and I couldn't sleep, and it was probably midnight or 1 a.m. And I just, was already struggling with that insomnia very early on. And I remember just having this thought that came to me, and I sat up in bed and thought, I'm going to write about this one day. And it was just one of those moments, the light bulb just went off. And I'd always been interested in writing. I had, submitted some letters to the editor that summer. And actually, when I was younger, I used to have a weekly newspaper that I would write and distribute to family and friends. Oh. And so I'd always liked writing. But, it was just kind of a way for me. I think for me, I wrote the book for two reasons, really. One, to make sense of what happened to me. I wanted to be able to take a step back and see the entirety of my experience over the 10, 11-year period, and be able to make sense of it in a new way. And there was so much of it that there were so many question marks throughout, and there's still some question marks. So, if you read the book, there's still question marks about some of it, and some is revealed and some is not, and it keeps you going throughout. But for me, I just really wanted to understand. So I went back and did a bunch of interviews and talked to a bunch of people, and tried to really piece the story together. But really, secondly, I would say my desire to write was really came from a place of trying to make some sense of meaning out of this experience. For me, it was a story that I never could escape. People who knew me in that time of my life knew me as the boy who was burned. I'd have people come up and talk to me about this. They were asking about my scars. My scars were visible, even more visible than they are now. And so I would get questions about them. And it was just always the story I was always asked about. I couldn't escape it. And so I decided, instead of trying to escape it, I wanted to embrace it. And so for me, the more I would speak about my story, and I had opportunities to do that in the first few years after the accident, and people would be really impacted by it. And I thought, wow, this is a way to make an impact and make something good come out of something that was so terrible. And so for me, it has been, having this book out has been such a healing part of my journey as well, to be able to have people who contact me and say, your book really impacted me and it made me think about things differently, or it made them realize some of the mental health struggles and identify some of those things that they were experiencing. And so it's so gratifying to make a difference, and it's really transformed, just impacting one life, transforms this experience from something terrible into something that has meaning. And so that's really, those were the two reasons why I wrote the book. I think writing the book was extremely hard, because it was revisiting things that were challenging for me to, kind of revisit, but it was also incredibly cathartic, because it was really able to use my voice to tell my story in the way that, I wanted to tell it, and to set the record straight, as it were, of this is what happened from start to finish, and this is my story, and then offer it up to the world in the hopes that they could identify with the scars I have, and that it would impact them and encourage and inspire them as they face adversity in their own lives.
Yeah, no, that sounds incredible. And it's not just for other burn victims. There's stuff to be learned, I'm sure, from anyone who reads it. So I think that's really awesome that you took you're into writing. You took a passion with writing, and then you applied it to something that happened to you, and it's really putting something bright out into the world as a result. So that's really, really cool. All right, so I've got one more for you. What advice do you have for anyone in the audience who's currently facing any adversity?
Yeah, that's a great question. I know so many people who, especially right now, right? There's so many people who are really facing adversity as a result of this ongoing pandemic.
Yep.
Whether it's knowing people who got COVID-19, or job economic impacts, or just the loneliness and the isolation that so many of us feel as a result of having to stay at home during this pandemic that seems to never be coming to an end. I would just encourage people. I would say, I think one, be intentional about your healing journey. Healing takes work. It is not something that comes automatically. It's not something that you can just kind of set an autopilot to and that it just takes you to your destination. It is hard work, and you have to map it out, right? And sometimes you don't have a GPS for that. Sometimes you just have to map it up yourself and do it the old-fashioned way and figure out how you're going to get from point A to point B.
Yep.
And so I would just say be intentional about that. I would say too, seek counseling, find outlets, that can be helpful to you. If counseling something you can do that. I totally encourage that. But I would also say, find ways to identify and your scars. I think so many of us, we don't live in a culture that fosters talking about scars. We're encouraged to post the very best, pictures of us on social media, and but life is messy. The reality is we don't always look perfect. We don't, always have everything perfect in our lives. And so I think it's important to be vulnerable and honest and authentic in our dealings with each other, but with ourselves, and really identifying what it is that the scars that we have, whether they're physical or emotional. And then lastly, I would say, find ways, once you identify them, I think it's a way for you to be able to work through them. And then I think you can use your scars to help other people, or to make you, like I said earlier, to be a more effective leader, or whatever pursuit you have. I think you can apply those lessons and you can take them forward in your own life. And so I would just encourage you to see adversity as an opportunity to grow, to change, and to become the person you want to be. I mean, for me, I've learned so much more through adversity than I have when things are going well. Not to say that I wish adversity to come all the time, but just to say, adversity is an opportunity, and just keep going, and don't give up. And I can assure you, for the takeaway of this, I hope if you, don't remember anything else, remember this. You too can overcome, and you too can make a difference. I'm coming to you more than 11 years after my journey. My life looks very different than it did back then. I was able to graduate high school, graduate college on time, despite my injuries. I was able to get a job in the tech industry. I met the love of my life and married her last August. And now I have a book out. And so there's, hope. There's always hope that you too can overcome, and you too can make a difference. And I hope that that's something that you walk away with tonight for those listening in.
100%. I love that takeaway. I think it's so true too, because, it's so easy to feel helpless, or like you're the only one in the room that's going through something, but, everyone is going through something at all times. So I think it's super important just to remember that if everyone's going through it, everyone can get through it. So I think that's a great takeaway. And congrats on your wedding and your book. It's awesome.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. All right. So I think those are all the questions that I've got for you. So I think that concludes our talk for today. And I just want to give you another huge thank you, Samuel, for joining us tonight and sharing your story. I really think you really are the perfect example of a survivor with all the adversity that you've had to overcome. So thank you for inspiring and empowering us tonight. And everyone go check out his book. It's definitely something I'm going to be adding to my reading list. There it is. Nice. Definitely adding that to my reading list. So thank you again so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. And there's a lot that we weren't able to cover the book. There is a twist ending as well that will keep people reading. So I encourage you to go read it, and would love to hear from readers. Contact me through my website, samuelmoore-sobel.com, and let me know what you think of it. Thanks for having me on, Kay.
Absolutely. Now, before everyone runs away, I just want to do, a quick few shout outs. If you want to share your story just like Samuel did today, please please feel free to let me know. You can email us at empowermentpodium@gmail.com or message us on our socials. We have an Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok account, all of which you can find by searching at Empowerment Podium or in the links in the description. So give us a follow there to stay up to date on when we'll be going live next and see some replays of our previous stories. If you like this stream, please like this video and subscribe to this channel. You can also hit that notification bell to receive a notification every time we post a new video or live stream. But until then, thank you all again for tuning in, and we will see